Hey guys, welcome to the channel. In this video we're going to be going over the G2 axle and if it's even worth spending your hard-earned money on. So I'm going to first talk about why I even bought the G2 axle. When I first started modifying my Jeep, I had the Dana 30 in it, and it just didn't work for my needs. I actually had the lower control arm brackets on that axle. It started to break off essentially, and so what I had to do was I had to go to this guy. I found this guy on Craigslist that he welds, and he ended up welding on some super heavy duty brackets, and I thought that was going to fix it. So he did that. I gave him the axle, did that, and what ended up happening was after about 200-300 miles, the axle started to leak from where the pumpkin was and where the driver's side tube coming out started to leak right at the bottom. And so I knew it wasn't going to be an easy fix. I had a guy quote me like $2,000 to fix, and I was like, this axle isn't even worth that much. It kind of sucked because I just put in 456 gears. I actually paid someone to do that. It cost me like $900 to do. And so what I decided on doing was I did a quick search, and after all my searches I landed on the G2 axle. It's actually the Core 44, and it's meant for all TJs, LJs, YJs, and XJs. So I've actually owned this axle. I bought it August of 2018, and then I didn't actually get it underneath the vehicle until the beginning of 2019, January 2019. Since I've had it for about a year now, I've actually taken it on some pretty rugged trails. This axle has seen the Rubicon this past year about 3 or 4 times. With one of those trips, I did the whole Rubicon trail. And so it took a beating, and it held up very nicely. I was actually really surprised with how well it took beatings on the rocks. I've also taken it snow wheeling. I've taken it to the dunes down at Pismo. I've taken it to a lot of places, and it's been everywhere I've taken it to. It's done amazing. But there are some things I wish I would have known before I bought this axle, just so I knew what I was getting myself into. Before I tell you about that, let me tell you what I fitted this axle with. I got it with 456 gears, added the Eaton E-Locker, which has been amazing. All you have to do is flip a switch, it's engaged, your front end is locked, and you're ready to go. The axle also comes with a 30 spline chromoly shafts. G2's website showed that this axle comes with some heavy duty ball joints. So since G2 specifically markets this axle as a direct swap into XJs, I figured, why not? Less work for me, but that ended up not being the case. So let me tell you about the pros about this axle. The axle is super beefy. I mean, it has a 3-inch diameter with the 5/16 wall DOM axle tubes, which it also has the forged inner C's, something that I've been looking for so I don't have to truss. I'm not a welder at all. I'm going to start learning how to, but it's nothing that I would have faith in. So this was a must for me. It needed to be beefy. The other thing was that this is using a JK44 ring and pinion for a larger diameter ring gear and a bigger pinion shaft to withstand all the abuse that I send at its way. The axle also has heavier duty lower control arm mounts, something that I wanted on my Dana 30. The other pro was that all the equipment that was on it, it actually came pre-installed. The gears, the shafts, it just came in a nice big box, ready to go. All you needed to do was take your old knuckles, throw them on, throw on your bearings, wheels, connect them to your control arms, and you're essentially ready to go. I mean, there might be a few little details here and there. You need to adjust the axle, the caster, things like that, but overall it's ready to go. So I really like that it also had the aluminum bump stop spacers. This was a really nice touch that came with the axle. what I had to do was I had to add 2 hockey pucks to each side so I can get a little bit more of a width. My tire was hitting the fender, started cutting up my tire a little bit. So now, because of this, tires are clear from the fenders, and now everything's working out great. Something that I really liked that G2 did was that they added a drain plug right at the bottom of the pumpkin. Because before that, you have to unbolt the diff cover and then break its seal. And then at that point, you have to drain it out, reseal it with RTV, bolt it back on, and then fill it. But with this now, you don't have to unbolt it and re-put the RTV on. You simply, all you have to do is unbolt it from the top, unbolt it from the bottom, and then wait for it all to drain out, put the plug back in, and then from the top, fill it up, and you're ready to go. Boom. Simple. So easy. Thank you, G2. Saves so much time. And these are the cons from the axle. I wish someone would have told me when I first bought this. So a big con that I have is that where the track bar mount is, I wish there was an option when I was purchasing this axle to have an over-the-axle track bar mount. The reason for that is if you're buying an axle like this that cost what it cost, I actually spent around $4,000, about twice as much as my Jeep, right? If you're spending that kind of money, your vehicle is going to be lifted. It's going to have most of the bells and whistles. So from that point of view, I wish that there was an option to add it over the axle track bar mount. Now what I'm going to have to do is I have to go to a shop, since I don't weld, have them put brackets, test fit everything. It's just another hassle that I don't want to deal with, and I actually would have paid a little bit more to have that option. So G2, take some notes. Another issue that I ran into almost actually immediately, and that's what held up my build for about 3 or 4 months, was that the upper driver's side control arm was hitting the pumpkin. The pumpkin's actually so large that it was actually hitting the pumpkin, and I couldn't connect it to the lower control arm. So I actually had to reach out to G2 and ask them, hey, listen, what's going on? I was under the impression that it was going to fit. This was an issue that I never dealt with before. Basically, they told me to sit tight. I was pretty eager to get this axle on, so I was hounding them a little bit. I felt kind of bad, but I did spend all this money on this axle they said it was a direct swap. After talking to one guy, then he passed me along to another guy, and then another guy. This process took about a week and a half. They basically came back and told me, listen, your rough country long arms doesn't fit with this axle. And I was like, oh man, and this is one of the more popular long arm setups. So they ended up telling me that I needed to go out and buy some JK upper control arms from Rubicon Express, and that it would fit. I just swap it out and it would fit. Now that part, you can only buy them in pairs, and that cost me about $250. And so I got all excited. I was like, okay, I'll spend the money. Let's see what's going to happen. Ended up swapping it. Still didn't fit. And I called them up. I was like, what's going on? Like, it's not fitting. And basically, they just said, I don't know. You guys, you're just going to have to build one yourself. I've never built one myself, so I didn't know what I was going to do. Overall, I had to take it to this guy that knew how to weld. And basically said, yeah, he can handle it. He did it the first time. I tried putting it on. I didn't have the car sitting on its own weight, and so I didn't account for that in my measurements. So I ended up having to go back because it didn't fit the first time, and he had to make some modifications. It wasn't that bad, but overall that cost me about $150. So it actually ended up costing me quite a bit just to get this bolted in. It wasn't a direct swap. Now the last issue that I have with it, I recently took it to a shop because of some steering issues that I was having, and they actually told me that my lower ball joints were bad. There's some play in it, and I told them this axle is barely a year old, and they actually went back, checked it again, and they said, yep, the lower ball joints are worn, we need to replace it. I was just bummed that these ball joints didn't last that long, so I'm gonna have to upgrade them to either a Synergy or some other, I don't know yet, still working on that. Overall this axle is awesome. There are some negatives with this axle, but the pros of it just superseded it, and it was well worth it. I just wanted other people who are in the market just to kind of think about that before you actually decide on spending that kind of money. It's handled everything I've thrown at it and then some. I just actually want to thank G2 for putting together such an awesome product. It's a true beefy unit, and it's something that you're only going to be spending on one time. Right now, as it sits, it's an amazing product, and I'm a satisfied customer. If you want to ask me any specific questions on the G2 axle, feel free to comment below, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Hope you enjoy this video. Don't forget, like and subscribe.